If you've been following my channel for a few years now, you may have heard me say on several occasions that I feel there were two guys during the rock and wrestling era, that mid to late 80s period of the WWE, formerly the WWF, two guys that I felt absolutely should have been the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. Those two names are Rowdy Roddy Piper and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. And my reasoning for feeling like those two should have been world champion at some point is because they were absolutely, without question, the two best heels of the time period and should have been rewarded with championship reigns. And I'm typically the type of guy that prefers having heels as champions, and I would have loved it. And I think we could have gotten some great stuff out of them. Also, if you've been following my channel recently, you might remember that WrestleMania weekend I did a live stream where I went back and I rewatched all 5 of the WWF's main event specials, the 5 Friday night specials that NBC aired for the WWF from 1988 to 1991. And the very first episode of the main event, the most watched wrestling program in the history of American television, saw the rematch between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, where Andre the Giant defeated Hulk Hogan through, shall we say, controversial circumstances. And then right after winning the belt, he surrendered the championship to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, in that famous moment, paying off the storyline that Ted was trying to get the belt off of Hulk Hogan and proving that he could buy the championship, which he ultimately did on that show on that night. One of the most memorable moments in the history of WWF television, especially when you consider the dual referees and Hogan's, 4-year title reign had finally come to an end. It was one of the best angles in the history of the company, and something that they should be proud of, quite honestly. I think it's one of the best things they've ever done. So, but that night, people walked out of that show thinking that Ted DiBiase was the new WWF champion because Andre surrendered the belt to him and Ted was wearing and holding the belt, so it just appeared that Ted was going to be the new champion. Ultimately, it was decided that Ted would be stripped of the title, his reign would not be recognized, and then, as we all know, the title was put on the line in that 14-man tournament at WrestleMania 4, which was ultimately won by the Macho Man Randy Savage. However, I'm going to make the case that my feelings of Ted DiBiase and how he should have been a former champion might be a little misplaced. I'm going to argue today that Ted DiBiase should be recognized as a former WWF World Heavyweight Champion. And I'm going to use WWE's own championship history and their own, the precedents that they set themselves at various points in the history of the promotion to make my claim. And I'm also going to use just good old history to back myself up. So let's get started with Ted himself. So you look at the reign, it didn't, the Phantom Reign, as we'll call it for right now, didn't last very long. It only lasted a few days until ultimately it was decided to hold the belt up in the tournament. So what is it about that Phantom Reign that makes it an unofficial reign for the World Heavyweight Championship, and why is it not recognized? Well, technically he didn't beat anybody for the championship. Andre surrendered the belt to him, so he never actually beat anybody to become the champion. So at best, if this reign were recognized, he'd have to be recognized as somewhat of a paper champion, correct? And as far as we know, on television, he never had any successful title defenses of that belt, and was never advertised as the champion on television, never had any big pay-per-view matches as the champion, never had any big Saturday Night's main event specials where he successfully defended the title or anything like that. But I'm going to get around that, all of that, and use the WWE's own logic and own championship precedents against them to show that the record books should be amended and that Ted DiBiase should be recognized as a former WWF World Heavyweight Champion, and Vince McMahon should totally change the books and put Ted in the place of history that he deserves to be. So, if you look at various points in the WWE's histories, particularly during the Attitude Era in like the early 2000s, there are multiple cases of championships being awarded to people without them actually beating anyone to become the champion. You had Mankind becoming the first ever WWF Hardcore Champion. The belt was created and awarded to him by Vince McMahon. Started as somewhat of a joke belt, but became a recognized championship for the next few years. 1999 featured two such, instances of somebody being awarded a championship without actually beating anybody. Shane McMahon won the European title in early 99, successfully defended the belt at WrestleMania 15 against X-Pac, and ultimately retired the championship not long after that match. So the European Championship was deactivated once Shane had forfeited the belt, until the corporate ministry was formed, and fellow member Mideon reached into Shane's gym bag, pulled out the European Championship belt, and was officially recognized as the European Champion. This is something that happened on WWF television. Ultimately, Mideon would lose the belt to D'Lo Brown, who I believe that was his third championship reign. And Mideon's reign as champion is recognized as an official reign for the European Championship. A title that is now deactivated, but again, I digress. And later that same year, in September of 99, the returning British Bulldog defeated the Big Boss Man to become the WWF Hardcore Champion. Like I said, the Hardcore Championship started as a lark and it had now become an officially recognized belt, and had a title history and lineage up to that point. The British Bulldog defeated the Big Boss Man and then proceeded to award the championship to Al Snow. Al Snow never beat British Bulldog for the championship. He didn't beat the original champion, the Big Boss Man. But Al Snow's reign was recognized as an official reign for the Hardcore Championship, along with the other 240 whatever once the 24/7 rule kicked in. But my basic point is that the WWE is setting up precedents for recognizing official championship reigns, despite the fact that nobody was beaten to win those championships. And these weren't like these instances I'm talking about, the European title and the Hardcore title. No tournaments were won, no battle royals were won to declare a first champion. They were just awarded to the person. So it's funny, like in the years following the main event, it actually became a precedent that awarding somebody a championship was something that could stick. And did this ever happen with World Heavyweight Championships? Yes, it did in 2002. When Brock Lesnar took the undisputed WWE Championship over to SmackDown exclusively, Raw was left without a world champion. So Eric Bischoff brings out the big gold belt, awards it to Triple H, and declares Triple H the first ever Raw World Heavyweight Champion. Triple H didn't beat anybody. He had actually just come off of a huge loss to Shawn Michaels, so one would argue he wasn't even credible enough to be the World Heavyweight Champion based on his recent loss. There you go, right there. You have a World Heavyweight Champion being awarded a championship by management, but that's officially recognized as a reign in WWE history. And it happened again a few years later in 2007 at No Mercy when John Cena got injured and had to forfeit the WWE Championship. Randy Orton was awarded the WWE Championship by Vince McMahon. Now, that pay-per-view was also a wacky situation where Triple H beat Randy Orton for the belt that same night, and then he had to defend the belt against Umaga and then beat him, and then Randy Orton barely beat him in a last man standing match at the end of the show to win back the belt. So through some, like, I don't even know what you want to call it, gobbledygook, like booking gobbledygook, Randy Orton walked out with the WWE Championship, but that night started with him being awarded the championship by Vince McMahon, and that reign is officially recognized, even though it didn't last long, even though Triple H would just defeat him minutes later to end the reign. It is an officially recognized reign, even though he didn't beat Cena, and once again, he was just awarded the championship. Granted, he was supposed to face Cena that night for the title, so you could say that Cena forfeited the belt to the person he was supposed to face. But my basic point is, you don't necessarily need to beat a guy to be declared the champion, as long as you have, in the case of the British Bulldog and Al Snow, if you have the blessings of the championship holder, your reign is recognized. And in the case of the European title with Shane McMahon and Mideon, or with the World Heavyweight Championship between Eric Bischoff and Triple H, or Vince McMahon and Randy Orton in 2007, there are cases where if management backs you, then your reign is officially recognized. I guess in Ted's case, what hurt him was that Jack Tunney didn't back him and refused to recognize his reign. But you do have one other title reign that is officially recognized as Hulk Hogan's fourth title reign, where he defeated The Undertaker Tuesday in Texas, 1991, basically making up for the loss that he suffered at Survivor Series just a few days earlier. Now, this is an interesting one because very much like Ted, Hogan won the match and walked out that night as the champion. Was in the eyes of the fans, he was recognized as the champion coming out of that show. But Jack Tunney ultimately stripped him of the title, feeling that his victory was controversial. and decided not to stick with it, and ultimately Hulk Hogan was stripped of the belt. However, his reign, that fourth reign, is still recognized as an official championship reign in WWE history. And actually, if you look in the WWE's long history, there are a ton of controversial title wins and victories that that are recognized in the grand scheme of things. Whether it be some gigantic heel turn taking place and massive outside interference or excessive cheating. It's kind of a standard in pro wrestling to recognize controversial reigns, no matter how they started. So, and it's generally understood that as long as they have their hand raised and they're wearing the belt, then they walk out that night as the champion. But yeah, I guess there's still like a little wiggle room there with Ted, where it's kind of like, yeah, but like you said, he didn't have Jack Tunney's backing, so if management's not backing him, then the Phantom Reign stays a Phantom Reign. It never actually happened. And you also have a certain case in Raw's history, or WWE's history with Monday Night Raw in 2000, where Jericho defeated Triple H to become the WWF champion. One of the most exciting moments in Raw history and then we had the rug pulled out from under us, where the referee reversed his decision and ultimately gave the belt back to Triple H. But I would consider that a referee reversal. So it's not so much... The reason Jericho's reign doesn't count in that case is because the referee's decision was reversed. So he basically changed his mind. So it wasn't like management came up with this massive decision to strip Jericho of the belt or anything. The referee just changed his decision, basically. And... what happened that night at the main event in 1988, the referee's decision was allowed to stand. So, again, there's a lot of wiggle room and, like, a lot of, like, crazy instances and not a whole lot of consistency, which it's almost like wrestling's not real or something. And, and they just kind of make up the rules as they go. It's kind of crazy. But the big thing to me, which I found out recently, when I heard about it and I read about it, I thought, okay, if this stuff happened, then Ted should be recognized as a former champion. And that comes in the days that followed the main event, at live events, at house shows. And some people argue that house shows don't count. I argue Bret Hart won his first WWF championship at a house show. So in my mind, it's like, yeah, house shows don't count. Okay, except championships have been won at house shows. And they've affected... television programming. So, in my mind, house shows do count. And I will use various examples of championships changing hands at house shows. There have been, I remember Edge won his first Intercontinental title at a house show in 1999. And there are a few other instances. It's very rare, but it does happen, and when it does happen, it does count when it comes to television. So, in my mind, house shows do count. So, with that in mind, let's look at what happened in February 1988. In the days that followed the main event, at several live events, Ted DiBiase was going to these events with the WWF World Heavyweight Championship belt and was advertised as the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. He went out there with the belt, typically worked tag matches against Hogan, but he was the one carrying the belt, and he was advertised as the champion at those live events. So, to me, does that constitute managerial backing? If, the company is actually advertising him as the WWF champion? Doesn't that constitute some form of legitimacy if the company is advertising him at live events as the WWF champion? And I've even seen promos from Ted that he cut at these live events with the belt. So there is some footage of this that exists, and I'll leave a link in the description. I found it on YouTube. So it's like, okay, that's very interesting, but there's one little thing that's missing. Ted, again, like I said, never actually defended the title on television or on pay-per-view. Never had any successful title defenses under his belt. But again, the caveat there is on TV and on pay-per-view. However, at one live event, according to the history of the WWF website, in 1988, let me pull up the card right here. Okay, Los Angeles, California, the Sports Arena, February 8th, 1988. Ted DiBiase pinned Bam Bam Bigelow after Virgil hit Bigelow with the world title belt. DiBiase was billed as the WWF World Champion, and the match was recognized as a title match. So, what we have here is an interesting case where Ted DiBiase was at these live events advertised as the WWF champion. And at one of these live events, he defeated Bam Bam Bigelow in a match that was billed as a WWF championship match, and successfully defended the title. So in my mind, with all of that, and with all the retroactive stuff that WWE's done with the European title, the Hardcore title, the World title, and even the WWE Championship, where guys can be awarded championships in certain situations, whether it be the champion abdicating the belt or management backing them and awarding them with the championship. So there's that's retroactively become a precedent in WWE's history. And we have examples of Ted DiBiase being advertised as the champion and actually holds a victory in a championship match, in a match where he was billed as the champion. In my mind, that should count. I think the WWE should recognize Ted DiBiase's Phantom Reign from 1988 as an official WWF Championship reign, if for no other reason, just so that one match with Bam Bam Bigelow that was advertised as a WWF Championship match, one in which Ted successfully defended the championship, albeit through cheating, thanks to Virgil. But again, cheating, as long as the referee's decision is final, that's what stands. Ted DiBiase should be recognized as a former WWF champion and should no longer be viewed as a man that should have been the champion, and should no longer be viewed as one of those guys that should have but never did, and should no longer be viewed as one of the guys that they missed the boat with. Because in my mind, Ted DiBiase is a former WWF World Heavyweight Champion, and the record books should be amended by the WWE to reflect that. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor. That's all I got here. I just wanted to present my case here, and yes, I went a little too much into the weeds, went a little too much in the detail here, and I realize, yes, wrestling's a work, and yes, it's all a big show and entertainment and everything, but I'm a gigantic nerd with a lot of time on my hands, and I just, when I found out that he was at these live events, advertised as the champion, I saw promos, and then I went back and looked, and oh my god, he successfully defended the belt at one of the house shows. Assuming that the record books represented here in history of the WWE are correct, and if that's all true, he should be recognized as a former champion. To me, it's like, come on, guys, let's just make it happen. Let's give Ted his due, and I will even pitch this idea to you guys. This is probably something that they could use as an angle on TV, where Ted DiBiase comes out and tries to amend the record book to where he should be reflected as a former WWE champion. It's this is the 30th anniversary of when that happened. It was back in February, but I'm pitching this idea to you guys. You could even make this an angle on TV where where Ted DiBiase comes back and tries to throw his money around and try to bribe management to amend the record books to recognize him as a former champion, and you could have some heel help him out or something and be like his muscle helping him out, and then that guy gets a rub from helping the heelish Ted DiBiase get recognized as a former champion. They could even play it up as oh no, you can't recognize him as a champion. That was too controversial. It was one of the biggest controversies in the history of the WWE. You can't do that. And just see if you can get a story or an angle out of it. I think I'd be down for it. I'd be totally down for it. I don't mind having Ted on my TV again and getting him to talk and laugh again. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. I remember when they were doing the guest host spots on Raw in 2009, the episode, and I hated that era of Monday Night Raw. I hated the guest host stuff, but probably the best episode was the one where Ted was the guest host, because it was great to see him, and I thought they got some really good stuff out of him and his son and their interactions together. And, just throwing ideas out there. I'm just saying, maybe I'm just too big of a Ted DiBiase mark, and I'm just kind of anything to get him in the spotlight, anything to, give him his just due, I'm down for it. So, yeah, I just want to come on here and just throw my 2 cents out there on the whole situation, and also show some love for one of my favorite heels of all time, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. I thought he was a great performer, fantastic heel. The main event is one of my favorite moments in the history of the WWE. I really loved going back and rewatching it when I did my live stream and watched, lived through that whole moment again. Because as I said, and go back and watch the live stream, I made the comments man, watching Ted with that belt, the one shot of him wearing the belt and holding his arms up, I was like, man, I got chills right now looking at this. This is just, even today, it feels surreal to watch that. But yeah, I just wanted to throw this video out there and just do something a little bit fun. So getting back to business, my next live stream will be happening on Saturday. I'm going to shoot for Saturday morning as per usual, but that might change. It all depends, so who knows. But yeah, hopefully you all are enjoying your week. Hopefully you all are ready for a great weekend. But that is all I have for you now. So until next time, peace out, everybody.